Okay, we're coming back now. Cultural architecture, landmarks for tomorrow. So we've got cultural architecture shaped by human experiences, seeks to connect individuals with broader concepts and each other. Buildings like museums, theaters, heritage sites, monuments, religious and public spaces, not only mirror contemporary life and communities, but also stand as symbols that celebrate and convey diverse cultures. We have Suneet here today, back on the stage for another session as our moderator. We have Sacha, Global Design Director of Aspect Studios. We have Otto, Design Director of LAAB Architecture. And we have Ankur Choksi, Principal at Studio Lotus, one of my favorites. Welcome, guys, and leave you with the audience. Take it away, Suneet.
Thank you, everybody, for showing up. And this discussion is about culture and architecture, how culture informs architecture and how architecture can influence culture. We have three amazing panelists with us from three very different cultures and landscapes from across the world. We would love to start with very quick presentations by all of our panelists. Otto, why don't you take the stage first and present? Yeah.
Hi everyone. So my name is Otto. I'm from LAAB Architects from Hong Kong. So we are a collective of architects, designers from various disciplines, as well as engineers and sociologists all together in a studio based in Hong Kong. And we also have a couple of persons in London at the moment. So with this collective of people, we got the chance to design different placemaking projects from art to architecture, and everything in between. And that's why we have two A's in our name, LAAB. So as we are talking about cultures as a very big topic, so we see that in our projects there are places that we make for cultures, for hosting cultures. And in the past 10 years, since we founded our studio, we saw that there is a huge growth of arts and culture scenes in Hong Kong. With the arrival of Art Basel in Hong Kong 10 years ago, and there has also been an emergence of different cultural venues, including the PMQ, Tycoon, as well as the M+ and the whole West Kowloon Cultural District, beginning to open their doors one by one. At the same time, our studio also had some opportunities to work on different types of cultural venues, including the Philips Asia headquarters, which is a 50,000 square feet auction house, galleries, cafe, and social places. We also work on this F22 photo space, which is an independent cultural space dedicated to photography, art, and design. And this is the Sun Museum, which is an independent and non-profit museum dedicated to art and culture in Hong Kong and China, which is opening in a few days later. An Asia Art Archive, an archive dedicated to the collections of different art forms and documentations throughout Asia. And this is their library, which is also used as an event space as well as a gallery of artwork. And this is our very own gallery, which is a part of our own office. We call it Comma. It's a place where we connect the community with art, architecture, and coffee. And so we run our own exhibitions within our studio all the time to connect the community with art and architecture and coffee. Culture as activators. We see that there is actually a growing interest for both the public and private sectors to see art as having the power to engage the public. So we have been commissioned to work on various types of art installations in Hong Kong, including those in public park. And people really appreciate the interactivity of art and how it makes the space more engaging. We also work in places like the airport or the hotels And sometimes we actually design not only the art, but also the space together, creating a holistic experience of both the interior and the art. And this is K11 Museum in Hong Kong. So it's not just a shopping center, but we envision it as a cultural destinations that celebrates art, craft, nature, and innovations. So in the project, we use a lot of digital craftsmanship techniques to design, not only creating expressions of itself, of its own identity, but also allow it to host different types of cultural events, such as the dance that you can see here. And in the same project, we also got our scope expanded to the outdoor space as well. So we work closely with James Conner to craft these landscape spaces for hosting different types of cultural events. Lastly, culture as identities. So whenever we design a project, we always ask the question of the identity of the context, the site, and the project itself. And when we work on projects in Hong Kong, it's easier. But when we work on projects outside Hong Kong, we are like having to ask the questions of what is our identity. And for this project, it is Ichigo Shimari in Japan, which is the largest outdoor art museum in the world, I think, with 200 artworks over 800 square kilometers of space. And we are asked by the government to design a house for the art gallery as well as an artist residence for Hong Kong artists. So instead of creating a landmark, maybe a tower, to speak explicitly about Hong Kong, we decided to create something very subtle, modest, that blend into the rural village context. And here we have brought in a luggage, a few items, including the tiny mailbox that you can see on the left of the screen, a signage of neon sign, as well as a shutter gate. And all of these were actually made by traditional craftsmen who has been doing these things for over many, many decades. So we asked them to help to create these designs for us and let us bring them to Japan. And that actually forms a dialogue of craftsmanship between Hong Kong's craft and Japanese craft. This space has been hosting different art exhibitions and cultural events as a cultural hub of the locals during the summer, and in winter actually goes dormant. So lastly, it's a project that we designed for the Avenue of Stars in Hong Kong. We were asked to create a food kiosk as a cultural icon for Avenue of Stars. And on the left, those are the previous kiosks that we were asked to replace. And we took the idea of the market stores as well as the action movie as the cultural representations of Hong Kong as our inspiration for this project. So here's a video of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Otto. Sacha, you're next.
Thank you very much. Hello.
Just hold it closer. Yeah. Is it fine?
Hello.
Yeah,
That's
perfect.
Thank you. Beautiful work, Otto. Okay, so hopefully my presentation can come up, but my name is Sacha Coles. I'm the Global Design Director of Aspect Studios. We're from Australia, now a international or a global company in 9 studios, 4 continents across the world. But we're very local and we're very conscious of where we come from. Aspect Studios, the aspect is the one studio, global idea. The studios is the local response to place. In the words of Darawal, I would say Budyeri Gamaru. This is an important thing in Australia now. We're talking about culture, and many of you will know that Australia has the longest continuous culture of anywhere on the planet. Over 40,000 years, our First Nations people have been looking after our landscape. And in the discussion of culture, this is the most important point that we are currently grappling with as designers, how to engage with old knowledge in a relatively new culture. So hello from Sydney. This is where I come from. This is my place. The sandstone here, the horticulture, the trees, the blue sky, and the quality of light is particular to this place. The city, as many of you would know, for its icons and its incredibly beautiful and engaging harbour. This is just one layer of the city which I call home. So in terms of our practice, what we do a lot in the public realm. Our service is to cities, to city shaping, and to the public. Our measure of success is how you engage with these places, whether they be large city transformations or small pop-up projects of the scale that you've just seen. In terms of place, we talk a lot about what that word means. And of course, place has been defined in many ways, but we talk about it as space with meaning or space with narrative. And every place must be memorable through the engagement of its senses. It must be delightful. It must be memorable, and you want to return back to that. A lot of the projects that we're dealing with are complex, many stakeholders, some in heritage locations like this one in Circular Quay. And this is the quality of the heritage buildings that you'll see behind in this photograph here. We use materials to tell stories. In many cases, we collaborate with artists. In this case, down in Chinatown in Sydney, the paving is used to tell the story of the former rivers and fish that used to be in this reclaimed land. Horticulture, biophilia. This is an incredible way to tell the cultural story of place. These plants are from this place and always have been from this place. Connections. Culture is understood when we bring people together. A lot of our work is simply about bringing opportunities together and leaving the step or the stage design for people to carry out their lives. The goods line is one such place. Communal tables, opportunities for a range of uses. And many of our projects just touch the ground very lightly. In fact, we challenge our studio to say, what will this place be in 10 years, in 20 years, in 50 years? And we as a panel have been talking about the nature, the meaning of sustainability in architecture. When you're building, it's essentially an unsustainable act. So how do you design for sustainability and resilience? Well, you have to commit to the process of time. Biophilia is something you'll hear a lot about health and well-being. And what that means is not just bringing in plants, but understanding the qualities that light and sound and sensory design can bring. And again, this has very different meanings depending on which culture you are designing in. In terms of design, as a design practice, like many of you, we test things, we fail, we keep testing, we use tactical means, we use models, we draw, we communicate. Most of our work is one-off. We don't have a kind of a business as usual model. Some might be models, some might be play spaces that are completely unique to that location. And that's the message that I'd like to discuss today when we're talking about culture. Thank you.
Thank you, Sacha.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for that, Otto, Sacha. So we are a practice based out of Delhi. There's a wide spectrum of work that you're going to go see today. So we are still also kind of deliberating with this whole idea of how our practice gets informed by the place where we are. And in some way, we believe that there's a possibility of what you're building informing the new sense of culture, bringing it alive. So I'm trying to demonstrate some of our ideas and what our explorations have been. The first one I'm I'm going to take the scale of the city. In India, cities are really, there are no public spaces as such. They're slowly growing now. And this idea of public spaces is something that we really value. And there are a few projects that we've been part of, lucky to be part of. So this first one is in Mumbai. It's a developer who had this vision of giving back a small part of their development to the city. And the new development was coming up on this old industrial land where they wanted to use some of these old buildings to become markers for the new community. And one of the first steps was to create this gateway to the city, which is a small public space holding a lot of F&B experiences, a little amphitheater for large gatherings to come together. And we've re-articulated the old warehouses into a new build using some materials which would kind of age really well and stand the test of time for the next, 50, 60 years it will last. And there are little experiences which have been re-articulated using the old elements found on the site. Another project that we've recently kind of become part of, it's a large development in Coimbatore. Again, old mill structures which are getting re-transformed for public experiences. This is slowly becoming a city center, really coming alive with, so old sheds have been converted into F&B as well as shopping experiences, retail experiences. Also for us, the opportunity of putting buildings in our urban landscape often becomes really important because more and more the cities are becoming very homogeneous. So globally, like cities like Gurgaon and especially in India, you can't really place the city in the country. It draws a lot from, say, things which not really have any local presence. So wherever we find an opportunity, we've kind of looked at what can be brought on board. So for example, this building is in Jaipur. It uses a lot of local influence. And one of the key things is when this client came to us, they had this building built up and she was not happy with it. Instead of bringing it down, we actually reconsidered the whole program, kind of wove it through the existing floor plates available to us. And then for the articulation of the facade, we drew from the local influences. So India has this kind of parallel fair amount of architectural legacies which have been woven into over the years. So drawing from Art Deco and various other architectural movements, this building was derived. Another example is this marker that stands now in Okhla, in one of the city centers in Delhi, where our inspiration was those old buildings that you see in the central image, which are part of a legacy that existed in that region. These are old brick-built kind of structures for various kinds of industrial purposes. And this new building is office space, which is a leasable commercial building. But it kind of was articulated in this way to maximize the daylight penetration given the scale of the site, but also becomes an interesting expression, taking inspiration from what existed around. India is, as you would all know, there's huge amount of architectural legacy that exists, and there's constantly this need that comes up of how do you start using those old heritage structures for making them, repurposing them for relevant use today. So one example is this small F&B space that we've done in the city center, the City Palace of Jaipur, where it existed as an old cafe, part of the museum circuit, and we kind of reinterpreted a new build structure in the middle of it, which is interpreted like a little jewel box made with marble and handcrafted fully. The old structure was just restored with lime plaster, and there's a juxtaposition of both the structures. The central structure allows for the F&B to come alive and anchors the space. Sorry, I'm rushing through this because we want to quickly get into a discussion. The other project that we are working on right now is a interpretation center and a ticketing experience. So this is part of a master plan at the Mehrangarh Fort. And we're basically trying to work with a completely hybrid system of construction. Stone construction is very popular in this area, but we've used a new way of looking at a building, because the idea was to make it available for the clients to program it as we kind of evolve the building. And it was moving at a fast pace. And during the course of the building, we've been like able to accommodate multiple program changes because of the modularity of the structure. So it's all dry construction using metal and stone, but using local skill. So there's a lot of layering of handcrafted kind of expression on the stone itself. As you know, in the temperatures of Rajasthan, this Jali mode methodology really works in terms of cooling system. So all the corridors are cooled using this extensive stone filigree work. And our attempt was to make it as quiet as possible when it sits against this majestic fort. Further deep diving into our interest in working with craft that's available in our area. So this is a project, a resort we built over a 150-year-old man-made dam. So the structure itself had to be really light. So it's a 13, 14 key resort, and it lightly perches on this man-made dam at the edge of a reservoir. The main public building is again a dry construct between metal and stone. And for the expression of the actual rooms, we worked with an artisan, a Delhi-based textile designer who works with block printing. And she made a lot of beautiful drawings from the local flora and fauna, which have then been kind of taken up by the local craftsmen and they've given it a new rendition in different materials. So from wood to stone, all of this has been kind of translated, used as a backdrop for our interior narrative. And the last project is a public building that we got to do. A government building that we got to do. And they wanted a sense of presence to be created with this building. So one of the key ideas that we got them excited about was to try and introduce the ground floor to completely open up to the city and allow for people to interact with the building. And the office floors have been moved to the upper level. And the ground floor also became where the intent was to create this idea of patronage from the government to work with craft. So the entire ground floor is a very soft stone found locally, and it allows for a lot of large-scale murals to come together. So that's all done at site after the stone was installed. So there are about, I think, 6 to 8 kinds of crafts that we've been able to explore, and about 50 to 60 craftsmen worked on this. So there's a short film I'll end this with.
We were quite excited, with the quantum of work that could be generated if artisans, if craft and architecture could come together. And I think that has been a big achievement, that this building project could generate work for about 50 artisans for a continuous 6 months. And we actually got, artisans who had stopped working with the traditional skills. We convinced them to come back and to start working again.
आम साथरे काम करुले से सेमती निर्दिष्ट गोटे ही काम भितर रही चिंताधाराटा से गोटे भितर रही निर्दिष्ट मूर्ति बनवारे चिंताधाराटा से भितर सीमित थिला जार फल यही कामटा कृषि भवन काम कर आम मानक देखागला से प्रकृत में आम कलाटा को केमतिका अन्य दृष्टि भी देखि परिबा.
It's a perfect setting for us where we could bring in artisans and craft. If you talk of farmers and if you talk about people coming from villages to this building, then we want to show them something that's familiar to their environment, and that is where craft comes in.
Thank you.
Thank you to all three of you for, some of you have cheated a tad with the time, but I shall forgive that. And we have a very short time left for the discussion. So I'm going to start with Ankur, you.
Sure.
I think the project that you've presented last actually feeds very well into what the question I'm going to ask, which is culture in the terms of architectural history, in terms of architectural traditions, right? It's something that's very evident in your work. The question is, how do you choose what to preserve, what to retain, what to contemporize, what to discard? Because there are so many different markers that come at play. How do you even make up your mind when you're dealing with something, a history that is so large and it has evolved over so many thousands of years? How do you choose what parts of that to celebrate, what parts of that to take forward?
That's a very complex question, and there are, I would say there are multiple things that at play. One of the, I thought there was an echo there. Okay, so one of the key things that we start with is probably the relevance to our lives today, relevance to the material, relevance to the region, the skill, the socio-economic impact it could make, and then our attempt always is to reinterpret it so that there is a sense of today that infuses in it, and to look out at the next few years that will last. So how do you bring in timelessness? How do you integrate a story that is of today, which will live up to the aspirations of what our world is looking at?
Because it's very easy, right, when you're dealing with culture, to do a very cliched version of an image of a culture, or a very stereotypical way of addressing it or presenting it. And that is a challenge that I assume firms like you face when you're dealing with something like this.
Yeah, so I think this idea of, at least in India, you see that often there's this idea of the living tradition, which in some way, when you talk about culture like that, it feels like it's trapped in time.
Yeah.
But it's always evolving, right? And there is this sense of evolution that one needs to celebrate, and one tries to celebrate. I think that's what makes it exciting for us. And every time we make choices, we are looking for what's in it for the next few years. How is it going to stay alive for people and still be aspirational? So, for example,
how will this travel over time?
Yeah.
Got it. And I think, Sacha, with your work, I love the way you speak about place, the culture of place, the smell of rain, the way the land feels on your feet, for instance, right? How do you even absorb something like this? So logistically, as a firm, when you start a project, right? Yes, you're working in Sydney, but you're working across different landscapes and different geologies, like you say. What is the process that you follow when you first begin deconstructing those layers of, cultures, geologies, how people speak, what people eat, what people wear?
Yeah, I think the more complex that things become, the faster that things become, the more access that we have to new technology, where we can now do, everything, everywhere, all at once, to use that film. But it's true that authenticity and simplicity becomes much more important. So how do we do it? We go back to the basics. So as a landscape architect, or any good designer who's working externally, any architect should understand where the sun is rising and falling, should understand what the wind is doing, should understand how much rain occurs in this place. So you can design specifically to that place for those elements. That's fundamental, and no amount of AI or culture sharing across different places across the globe is going to give us that sense of authenticity. We have to go back to the roots of analysis and design to understand what matters. And every culture, there is something that binds us all three, even though we look different. We all have something similar in common, and we'll leave that to you to guess what that is. But so you have to go back to those fundamentals to kind of understand how you draw out the uniqueness of place.
And I think from two of the longest existing cultures in the world to one of the fastest adapting and evolving cultures in Hong Kong, where you're from, Otto, what does culture mean in a city that's constantly evolving, constantly importing things from other parts of the world. And how do you read culture in a city like that?
So whenever I'm asked about the identity of Hong Kong or the culture of Hong Kong, is a very difficult question. As you have said, we are an importer. I would say that we are kind of our economy has been flourishing as a re-export hub of the world, and that's not only applicable to the economy but also to the cultures. So we import a lot of things. We grew up in British education systems. I went to school also in the States. I work in Italy, and then we watch movies from everywhere around the world. We are so much a fans of Korean pop culture nowadays, and then we watch Taiwanese drama, mainland Chinese drama in the past. So there are so many cultures that we are importing from daily goods to all kinds of like soft infrastructure, I would say, and that inform what we are. So we are a very, very diverse culture that is very global. I think in Hong Kong you can really truly find different cuisines from all over the world, and presented in a very authentic way. So we normally actually have the persons coming from everywhere in the world. Like we have great Indian food, we have great Australian cafe coffees. Like so, when I am trying to give an example, is our own coffee shop. We have black and white coffee coming inspired by the Australian coffee culture, and we also have masala chai coming from the Indian culture. So just our cafe menu already show that we have a mix of everything, and that's kind of creating our own identity. Yeah, so we're kind of like a Netflix, with all different cultures accessible for everyone.
I think what's also interesting about this conversation on culture is that all three of you come from countries that have historically been colonies. How do we decolonize design, right? In this day and age, especially with a population and a political climate that actually leverages that to their advantage, how do you educate and inform your patrons and your clients so that, again, like I said, it's not an image of a culture, you're still finding meaningful ways to engage and to bring out things from the past that must be celebrated in order to instill pride in a people, right? In order to bring out narratives that have gone, that have been erased over time. So I think, Ankur, with your work, that is a thread that we see very, very easily. How does that work when you're working on large-scale public projects with, sometimes with the government, sometimes with private patrons? Is that something that consciously you're thinking of as you're working on some of these projects?
So I think, honestly, I mean, we've never resisted because it's part of what's been there.
Yeah.
But we choose not to draw from it unless there's something that it's adding to the experience. So I would put it in a different way that the fact that it's existed doesn't really come up to us as a challenge. Sometimes we celebrate it because what it did in that time was also very fruitful, right, for the society. And so there are occasions when we go back to some of those influences and draw from it. And in the new times, I think there's a lot that's gotten lost because of colonization. And if one can bring that back in, bring the confidence, bring the, like for example, it was quite amazing when we did this one resort, a hotel in the old town of Jodhpur. The stone workers over the years had been doing something very traditional, and they'd always been at it. And suddenly we started working with them, and we did something very contemporary, which kind of changed their perspective. And that brought in a change that in some way influenced their own business and the whole infrastructure that they were working within. So those kind of experiences are very fulfilling, and I think that's what is needed in these times.
I think that's a very beautiful thing that you bring out, because especially when you're dealing with such histories, there's this sense of confidence and pride, that sometimes cultures will lose over time. And I think as you work with craft, for instance, even Otto, I think you're working with craft and traditional craftspeople. When you're engaging with them, one of those threads is to bring back their cultures and give it a new life in a contemporary way, right?
So when we are working with when we are designing lots of projects, it's quite common that the brief asks for some traditional traditional designs in our work. They want the localization, they want the local elements, and oftentimes when we think about it, it could be very thematic or very figural or cliche. So we don't actually want to just copy whatever existing in a city and then replicate and do it again. So instead of replicating things, we try to go directly to the craftsmen and ask them what they can actually innovate for us based on their knowledge over the last few decades of doing the same thing again and again. So they are very great at doing that thing, using that tools or using that materials. And then when we ask them to innovate for something else, it's actually quite interesting. Even the thing is new, but then you can see that there is a connection to the past. There is always connection to the material, to the technique that they use. And then we find that fascinating. And then we have been using that technique a lot in our different projects.
And Sacha, how does this inform your work? I mean, like you said, you're working in a country that has a very long past and history, but it's a relatively new country, right? You're only now coming to terms with the history of the First Nation, for instance, right?
Yeah, so right now as designers, it's a very interesting thing for us because in the last 5 or 10 years, we've really engaged with old knowledge that has always been there and shaped the very land that we're on. And so in every design project, if particularly large projects or public projects, the government has now mandated a series of guidelines which are about engaging with our First Nations knowledge. So it's called designing with country. They talk about everything around you as being country. Everything is related to you. The Western methodology has humans at the top, consciousness number one. The First Nations knowledge is a circle, and we are all in this circle, whether you're a plant, a person, the sky, the sea, and it's an incredibly complex, way too complex to talk about now. But in terms of craft, there's not one thing. There is a whole range of things that we're learning. And all of the things that are being passed on to us from traditional knowledge holders are useful, are incredibly specific to place. One example, a particular plant called a wattle tree. You probably know this. It's a yellow flower, beautiful coastal plant in Sydney. When it flowers, it's winter. It's also when the whales are migrating. So you can look up at a wattle on a cliff and know that the whales are coming past at this time. And it's these kind of secrets that are being revealed to all of us slowly over time that is incredibly exciting to be a designer at this point in Australia.
That's a lovely example. And, something that you said about working with the government there and setting up then they have established a set of guidelines, for instance, to do something like this. That leads me to think about patronage and who funds culture, right? Who funds culture, frankly, is very, very important because they get to choose which cultures live on, which cultures get erased, right? Yep. And all of you have been working for the last 15, 20 years in different parts of the world. Have you seen models of patronage evolve? Who has the money today? Who funds culture today? Ankur, why don't you go with this one?
So, as designers, I think there's a lot of opportunity today, and anybody can fund it. It's probably the conversation or bringing that insight into the brief, and when we are kind of deliberating on the brief, that's the opportunity I can see of that, really creating that conversation about what's there to celebrate. Like he spoke about, there's just so much that's getting lost, which existed. And if one could really bring that back to life in new projects and reinstitute that, I think that'll be wonderful. And that's how I see it, yeah.
In my role, I get to travel a lot, which is fantastic. And just coming from Taiwan yesterday and seeing the investment from a small city, Taichung, in cultural projects in their location. In Australia, our government funds public space. And it really depends where you go around the world. Different political systems, different government models, really depends on that particular place and how they fund culture. I see it less in the States, but I see it more in sort of social welfare systems where there's a hand of government to support their public. And yeah, I would say it's not one model, but in my experience, that's who's funding culture.
I think in the past, I'll say like before 10 years ago, most of the cultural museums and so on were all funded by the government and run by civil servants. But then there was a change in the last decade. So there are big institutes coming as a public bodies, but independent from the civil servants, like the civil servant systems. And then they do great museums, and then the civil servant trying to also catch up as well and doing better and better as well. And there are many independent organizations, big and small, from big companies to smaller individuals. Everyone are so into like creating galleries, museums, exhibition spaces. And nowadays, like us, we are doing that by integrating cultural galleries into our cafe, doing exhibitions, cultural sharings, as well as screenings all the time.
So I think that's a beautiful thing because, of course, there are typical examples of cultural buildings, of cultural places. You have museums, you have galleries that have existed over time, and multiple patrons have invested in those, right? But what's very interesting, especially with your work, as I see, is you're working in a city where sometimes there are typologies of buildings that are very dry and very boring, generally speaking, right? But you're able to introduce an aspect of art, an aspect of culture that makes it more lively, that makes the public engage with it a little more. So for instance, this mall, the retail example, is a shining example of something like that, right?
Yeah, I think, even our city is very small, and very intense, like very dense. And then in terms of who is funding the culture, there is also a very interesting organization called the Hong Kong Walls, which is a group of artists who paint the wall. And there are a lots of like people from the bar, restaurant, and so on, trying to hire them to paint the walls outside their restaurants and becoming a street of wall art. So they're all volunteer to. Like all the owners are volunteer to commission the artists to do that, and then there are also walls that the artists themselves do it themselves. So it becoming like a very organic creation of culture across the streetscape. Yeah.
What I want to end this panel today with is this idea of culture that builds over time. It also takes time to deconstruct culture, to reimagine cultures. And I know, Sacha, you believe very strongly about this. We're dealing with a world that historically has been about consumption, right? We as a species have been, we've always wanted to consume more resources, consume more materials, right? Especially with your projects, how do you subtly nudge our civilization back to a time or to a place or to a culture that's less about consumption and that's a little more about engagement? And how do you build new sustainable cultures, or how do you present new benchmarks or new precedents for how we must live?
I mean, we try and do it in every project. We're advocates for the beauty of time, and landscape, more than anything, gets better with time. We need time to make our projects thrive. Architecture, you can cut a ribbon. Interior design, maybe it lasts 10 years if you're lucky. But with us, we want our projects to last 20, 50, 100 years, because a tree is something that only shines after that period of time. And just very quickly, how do we do it? Well, I try and connect with people and their memories. Doesn't matter where you're from, in India, in Hong Kong, wherever you are, the diaspora that you're from. If you have a beautiful memory as a child, that memory will no doubt be about landscape, somehow. A beach, a tree, your grandmother's cooking, which has come from the land. it always goes back to that. And that's the thing that binds us. So I don't have to try very hard to unlock those kind of spiritual connections. But yeah, I try and act as an advocate for that.
And I think that feeds very easily again into Ankur's work, which is so much of that is about the circular economy, right? You're looking at buildings, you're looking at materials, you're looking at skill sets that you want to reimagine, that you want to bring back, that you want to breathe new life into. How do you look at this as presenting new benchmarks for the next set of architects? Because this is the culture of design that we're talking about here, right? We are influenced by what we see, what we think of as good architecture, good culture. Are you looking at your work through that lens already? You've been practicing for a fairly long time, and the hair is graying, like I said, right? Not that long. So are you looking at your work through that lens of presenting benchmarks to the next set of architects?
I think, from this lens, probably for us, what becomes really important is how authentic we are being and the integrity with which we operate. So even, we were speaking about this idea of time and sustainability is becoming more and more important, because when you want to do most things, you end up doing is for convenience, and you want to move fast. But things that are sustainable need time. They need energy and alignment as we move forward. And that's usually the most difficult part of putting it all together. So even the tactility of materials, more and more we recognize the fact that working with authentic materials gives you that sense of emotional connect, which is often missing, even though there is a lot of conversation around. We were again chatting about recycled materials, but there's a certain lack of soul that what you refer to, like he's speaking about landscape, I think what you connect with the earth most is very different from what is man-made. And that's something that we really reflect upon when we're working on how it ends up in the project. Yeah.
So thank you so much, all three of you. I think we've kept it under wraps. What we've ended up with is, we started with a panel about cultural architecture, right? And what we've ended up with is this sense of culture as a very broad phenomenon, right? There's the culture of heritage, of architecture, of where you sleep, where you eat, what you do, how you engage as a society. And I think that's the most beautiful part of something like this, that every single part of our lives is cultural in some shape, way, form. And there is no singular way that we can deconstruct culture, that we can look at culture. There are multiple ways, there are multiple threads. And I think all three practices that we have here are dealing with culture in different landscapes in very, very different ways. And I think all of them give us something to think about in terms of the new cultures that we want to build and the new cultures that we want to reimagine, and what kind of society and what kind of world we want to live in. So that's how I will wrap this up. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much to our panelists as well.
Thank you. Otto, Sacha, Ankur, amazing creators, amazing content, and fantastic discussion. Suneet.
Thank you.
Excellent panel. Thank you very much. We'll do a quick photo.